quiet girl at the back of the room. She always sat at the back of the room, near the window, quiet and unnoticed. Her hair often covered half her face, and her eyes stayed low. She never raised her hand in class, never joined group talks, and never made a scene. Most students didn't know her name, and if they did, they forgot it the next moment. But she didn't seem to mind. While others laughed, joked, and showed off, she stayed silent. Teachers sometimes called on her, just to see if she was still paying attention. She would answer in a soft voice, clear and correct, then go back to her silence. She wore the same gray hoodie almost every day, sleeves too long, always pulled over her hands. She didn't carry a phone, just a small brown notebook clutched to her chest like a treasure. Some students called her weird behind her back. Others thought she might be sad or even a little strange. She didn't smile much, didn't speak at lunch, and never played in the schoolyard. Still, no one saw her cry or complain. She was just ... there. Her name was Hannah, but very few ever said it. Most just called her the quiet girl. One afternoon, the school announced an event. It was the annual talent show, where students could sing, dance, tell jokes, or play music. The auditorium would be packed, lights shining, cameras recording, and the best acts usually went viral on social media. Posters went up all around the school, and the sign-up sheet filled quickly. People joked about it in the hallways. "I bet Ray's gonna rap again," one boy said. "Of course, and Mia will probably sing like she always does," another laughed. The excitement built as students showed off tiny pieces of their talents during lunch breaks, practiced in stairwells and empty classrooms, preparing for their big moment. And then one day, something strange happened. A name appeared at the bottom of the list, written in neat small letters. Hannah? The room had gone quiet when someone noticed it. Hannah? And the quiet girl? Someone whispered, "Wait, cheese. Gonna perform? What could she possibly do?" Whispers turned into laughter. Not the kind that comes from joy, but the kind that stings. Maybe. "She'll stare at us silently for 5 minutes." One girl giggled. "Maybe she'll read from that creepy notebook of hers." Another added. They laughed, not out of hate, but out of habit. No one expected anything from her, not talent, not voice, not even presence. But Hannah didn't say anything. She walked through the halls the same way, holding her notebook tighter than usual. She didn't respond to the jokes, didn't look up when they mocked her behind her back. That week, something in her eyes had changed. There was still quiet, but now it carried weight. Every afternoon, after the final bell, she went to the music room. Not many noticed her disappear there. Inside that empty space, she sat at the old piano tucked in the corner. The keys were dusty, some a little off tune, but she didn't care. Her hands moved slowly at first, trying to find the right sounds. Then, with her notebook open beside her, she began to play. No one else was supposed to be there, but the janitor, Mr. Ellis. It's an old man with a soft spot for music. Heard something that stopped him mid-step. He leaned against the door, listening. He didn't say a word. He didn't want to break the moment. Her melody was soft and broken, like someone whispering their pain into the air. It didn't sound like a famous song. It sounded like someone trying to speak without words. After she finished, Mr. Ellis walked away quietly, wiping his eyes. The next morning, he went to the music teacher and said, "You need to listen to that girl. She's carrying something in her music." But Hannah didn't ask anyone for help. She didn't want backup singers or fancy lights. She just came every evening, sat at the piano, and played the same song again and again, trying to get it just right, not for applause, but for herself. The other students were still laughing in the halls, still joking about her name on the list. Some said she would freeze on stage. Others said she might not even show up, but Hannah wasn't thinking about them. She wasn't playing for them. She was playing for a voice inside her that had been quiet for too long. And as the day of the talent show came closer, the quiet girl at the back of the room wasn't as quiet anymore. Not in her heart, not in her music, and soon the whole school would hear it. A life of silence and secrets. Hannah's life had always been filled with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, lonely kind. The kind that filled every corner of the house and pressed against her chest every night. When she was just 6 years old, her mother died from a sudden illness. No one explained much to her, only that Mama wouldn't be coming back after that. The world became quieter for Hannah. Her father changed too. He stopped smiling, stopped playing music, and stopped looking her in the eye. He worked long hours at the factory, and when he came home, he sat in front of the TV with a drink in his hand. They didn't talk much, just exchanged short words like dinners on the table or don't be late. There were no hugs, no bedtime stories, no soft words, just silence. But there was one thing her mother left behind, an old keyboard with fading white keys and scratchy speakers. It sat in the corner of Hannah's room, covered in dust. She remembered watching her mother play it once, laughing while tapping melodies as Hannah clapped along. It was the only happy memory that stayed with her. Like a warm blanket, she kept folded in her mind. One cold evening, Hannah sat down in front of that keyboard again. She didn't know what she was doing. Didn't know any notes or scales. She just placed her fingers on the keys and pressed softly. A low, trembling sound came out, and something in her heart moved. She pressed another key, then another. It felt like speaking without using her voice. Every night after that, she would sit in the dark, playing for no one. She searched the internet for music lessons and wrote things down in her small notebook. She didn't try to learn famous songs like other kids. She didn't care about pop or rock or jazz. She just played what she felt: sadness, loneliness, anger, confusion. It all became notes. She called it talking to the piano. Because the piano never talked back, but always listened, that notebook became her best friend. She filled it with made-up songs. Little poems, short memories, and questions she had no one to ask. On bad days, she wrote longer songs, with heavy notes and broken rhythms. On better days, she added lighter sounds, even small pieces of hope. But she never shared them. Not with her father. Not with her teachers. Not with anyone. School wasn't much better. Kids didn't bully her directly. But she always felt like a ghost walking through crowded halls. No one sat next to her in class. No one invited her to birthday parties when she walked into the cafeteria. Eyes turned away as if she didn't exist, sometimes. Someone would whisper behind her back, and she would hear giggles, but Hannah had learned to live with it. She carried her silence like a shield, and the more they ignored her, the stronger she thought she became. But deep down, she was tired of hiding, tired of pretending she didn't care, and tired of keeping her songs locked inside pages no one would ever see. That's when the school announced the talent show. At first, Hannah didn't even consider joining. She sat in the same corner of the classroom while others ran to sign up. But something inside her began to whisper, not loudly, just a small, shaking voice. What if you let them hear? She ignored it for 2 days, but on the third day, during lunch, she walked quietly to the list taped outside the music room. Her hands were sweating, her legs were shaking, but she picked up the pen. She wrote her name in tiny letters, almost hoping no one would notice that night. She sat at her keyboard again. Her notebook open, she flipped through pages until she stopped on one piece she had written a few months ago. It had no title, only a date, October 14th, when I missed her more than usual. She remembered that night clearly. She had come home to find an old photo of her mother tucked in a drawer. Seeing her smile again had broken something inside her. She cried for hours, then wrote a melody that sounded like her tears. That was the song she decided to play, not because it was perfect, not because it was exciting, but because it was real. It was the only way she knew how to speak to the world. Every day after school, she went to the music room and practiced. She adjusted the tempo, changed a few notes, but kept the soul of it the same. Each time she played, her hands shook a little less. Each time she played, the pain felt lighter. She didn't care if they laughed. She didn't care if they walked out or whispered about her. All she wanted was to let that silence inside her speak, even just once. Not for fame, not for friends. Just for freedom. And as the talent show drew near, Hannah didn't feel strong, but she felt ready. Ready to let them hear the pain she never dared to say out loud, ready to tell her story without using a single word. The girl who made the world listen time passed quietly, but surely for Hannah. She kept making music, but now it wasn't just for herself. Her songs began to travel beyond the school walls. Beyond the city streets, people everywhere listened, and felt what she felt, even though they had never met her. She started composing music for short films and local theater groups. Her name was still not famous, but her music was becoming known. Therapists began using her melodies to help people who were grieving or struggling. Some said her music had a healing power. It was soft but strong, simple but deep, like a hand reaching out in the dark. At school, things had changed too. Students who once ignored her now asked questions about her songs. Some wanted to learn how to play like her, others just wanted to say thank you. Hannah still remained quiet, but now her silence was filled with purpose. One afternoon, a local journalist came to the school. She was curious about the girl behind the music that had touched so many. After the school agreed, the journalist found Hannah sitting in the music room, practicing softly. She waited patiently until Hannah finished, then gently asked, "What made you first decide to share your music with everyone?" Hannah looked down for a moment, then slowly looked up, eyes shining. She said, "Because for once I didn't want to feel alone anymore." She paused. Music was the only way I could speak the things I couldn't say out loud, and when I played, I felt like someone was listening, even if they didn't know me. The journalist smiled warmly. That song, that moment, it made the whole world listen. "Do you ever feel scared or shy now?" Hannah laughed softly. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but now I know it's okay to be scared, because the music is bigger than me, and maybe it can help others feel less alone too." Her story spread further. She was invited to perform on small stages, at charity events, even at hospitals, each time. Her music connected with new people, people who needed it most, and through it all, Hannah remained the same quiet girl at heart, still carrying her old notebook, still playing with gentle hands. But now, she was not invisible. Now, she was seen and heard, not just by the crowd, by the whole world. She was the girl who played a song no one knew, and somehow, everyone felt her pain instantly. And that was her greatest gift, the girl who made the world listen. The journey continues. Years passed. But Hannah never stopped making music. Her quiet songs grew louder in the hearts of those who listened. She no longer needed to hide in the back of the room. She had found a way to let her voice be heard without saying a word. Her music was played in hospitals where people fought pain and illness, in therapy centers where broken hearts tried to heal, in schools where children who felt alone listened and smiled. Every note carried hope, comfort, and understanding. Hannah became a composer for films and plays. Her melodies told stories of loss and love, of sadness and strength. People said her music was like a bridge, connecting broken souls to the light beyond their pain. But no matter how far her music traveled, Hannah stayed humble and quiet. She still kept her small brown notebook close, filling its pages with new songs and secret thoughts. One day a journalist asked her, "What made you choose music as your way to speak to the world?" Hannah thought for a moment, then answered softly, "Because music doesn't need words to be understood. It can carry feelings that are too deep for speaking." And when I played that song at the talent show, I realized I was not alone anymore. There were others who heard me, even if I didn't say a word. She smiled gently. And since then, I've never had to feel invisible again. Hannah's journey was not about fame or applause. It was about healing herself and others, about showing that even the quietest voice can be heard. If it speaks from the heart, her story inspired many people who felt lost, found hope in her music. Children who were afraid found courage in her silent strength, and the world learned to listen not just with ears, but with hearts, as Hannah sat by her window one evening, playing a new song softly on her keyboard. She knew her music would never be finished, because there were always new feelings to share, new pain to heal, but she wasn't afraid anymore, because she had found her voice in the quiet, and she had made the world listen. The day before the talent show arrived, like a heavy cloud over Hannah's head, the halls were louder than usual. Full of laughter, music, and nervous chatter, everyone was practicing. Everyone was preparing. The excitement in the air was thick, almost electric. Students ran down the hallways with guitars, costumes, and props. Some were trying their dance steps near the lockers. Others were rehearsing lines or warming up their voices. The school had turned into a stage even before the curtains opened. But Hannah stayed quiet, just like always. She walked through the crowd like a shadow. Holding her notebook tight, people barely noticed her pass by, except for the few who remembered her name on the sign-up list. "Is she really going to do it?" one boy asked. "No way, she's serious," another said with a grin. "She's probably going to back out, just trying to get attention." But Hannah didn't look at them. Her eyes were focused, not on them, not on fear, but on the notes inside. Her head, she kept repeating them like a whisper she didn't want to forget. After school, most students stayed behind to rehearse in the gym and auditorium. But Hannah slipped away into the music room, alone. The lights were off except for a small lamp near the old piano in the corner. That was her safe space, her little world. No noise, no pressure, just her and the keys. She placed her notebook gently beside the piano and took a deep breath. Then her fingers began to move, slow and careful. She played the song she had written, the one that came from the deepest part of her. Every note told a part of her story. The soft beginning, like a child calling out. The sudden drop, like a memory breaking. The slow rise, like learning to breathe. Again, after crying outside the room, someone walked by. It was Mr. Ellis, the janitor, the same man who had once played jazz in his younger days. He paused, just like before. He leaned against the doorframe and closed his eyes, listening. His old heart could feel what the girl was saying without words. When the last note faded, he slowly stepped into the room. Hannah noticed him but didn't flinch. She looked at him, expecting maybe a comment, maybe even a laugh, but he just smiled gently and said, "That's not just music, young lady, that's truth." Hannah blinked, unsure of what to say. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. He took a seat nearby and continued, "I used to play too, long ago, in clubs and bars. Every weekend," he chuckled, tapping his knee, "but I never played something that made me feel like that." Hannah lowered her eyes, shy and unsure. "Is it good enough?" she asked softly, almost in a whisper. Mr. Ellis leaned forward and said, "It's more than good enough. It's real. And sometimes that's all people need." That night, he told the music teacher about Hannah. "She's not loud. She's not flashy, but she's got something," he said firmly. "You should hear her, just once." But the teacher was busy with lights, sound checks, and performance orders. "I'll try," he replied distractedly, "but we've got a full lineup." Already, still, the words stuck in his head. A quiet girl with a powerful song. That wasn't something you heard every day back in her room. Hannah sat with her notebook open, reading over the notes. Her fingers traced each line, her eyes tired, but focused. She knew this might be the first and last time she ever played in front of people. She wasn't doing it for praise or attention. She just needed to let it out. She practiced one last time before bed, as the soft melody played through her fingers. Her eyes closed, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something deep. Inside, not sadness, not fear, but peace. She didn't care if they laughed tomorrow. She didn't care if they forgot her name again. She only cared about the music, about what it meant. Because even if they didn't understand her completely, they would feel something. And for a girl who had been invisible for so long, that would be enough. The curtain rises and laughter begins. The day of the talent show finally arrived. The entire school buzzed with excitement. Banners hung across the hallways. Lights were tested in the auditorium. And chairs were being lined up row by row by the afternoon. The whole school was filled with noise, laughter, music, and movement. For most students, it felt like the biggest day of the year. Backstage, students rushed to fix their costumes and warm up their voices. The gym had been transformed into a small theater. With a stage at the front and thick red curtains that hid the performers before their turn, the seats quickly filled with teachers. Students and parents, phones were out, ready to record. The buzz in the crowd was loud and joyful, and then the show began. The first act was a funny magic trick that made the crowd laugh. Then came a dance group that brought cheers, followed by a singer who got a standing ovation. Everyone clapped and smiled, enjoying each act as the show rolled on, but somewhere near the end of the list, people noticed a name they had forgotten about. Hannah. Students whispered again. "Just like they did when she signed up. She's really going to perform?" Bet she just stands there like a statue. I still say she's gonna freeze and walk off. Backstage, Hannah stood alone, far from the other performers. She held her small notebook tightly, her fingers slightly trembling, but her eyes were calm. She wasn't nervous in the same way others were. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just ready to let go. The student before her finished their act, a loud dance routine with flashing lights and heavy music. The crowd cheered as the curtain closed again. Then a teacher backstage turned to Hannah and gently nodded. "You're up next." She stepped forward slowly. Each step toward the stage felt heavy, like walking through a deep fog. The thick curtain was all that stood between her and hundreds of eyes. Then the curtain opened. She walked out alone, wearing simple jeans and her old gray hoodie. No makeup, no sparkle, no special effects. Just a quiet girl carrying a notebook, heading toward the grand piano in the center of the stage. The crowd went quiet at first, confused, unsure. Whispers began to stir like wind in the trees. Is that the quiet girl? She doesn't even look ready. She's not going to play anything good. Someone let out a tiny laugh. Another made a fake cough that sounded like boo. A few giggles followed, and for a moment the silence broke into quiet mockery. But Hannah didn't stop. She sat down on the bench, placed her notebook gently on top of the piano, and closed her eyes. She took a slow, deep breath, letting the noise fade behind her, and then she lifted her hands. The first note she played was soft, like the whisper of a memory. It drifted through the room gently, almost too quiet to notice at first. But then came the second, then the third each, one flowing like water from her fingertips. The sound filled the air, not loudly but deeply. It was a melody of something ancient, something aching, something real. The laughter stopped. The giggles vanished. The audience leaned forward. Not even realizing they were holding their breath, her fingers moved, like they were dancing, but slow and thoughtful. Every key she pressed felt like it carried a story, one of pain, of loss, of quiet strength. She didn't look up, didn't speak. She just let the music do the talking. A few teachers in the crowd blinked back tears without knowing why. One girl in the front row lowered her phone, completely caught in the sound. The students who once laughed now sat still, their faces slowly changing from curiosity to something they didn't understand: respect. Maybe even guilt. This wasn't a song from the internet. This wasn't a popular melody from a chart. This was something different, something raw. It was like someone had taken their soul and placed it gently on the piano for everyone to hear. And the room listened. The music built up slowly, rising like a wave, then falling like rain. Every note seemed to hold a piece of Hannah's life. Her silence, her sadness, her strength, all hidden in black and white keys. When she played the final note, her fingers paused in the air for a few seconds, then gently dropped to her lap. The auditorium stayed silent for a full breath, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then someone clapped, then another, and then the entire room exploded into applause. Not the polite kind, not the fake kind, but the kind that comes from something real. The kind that says, "We felt that." The kind that says, "Thank you for sharing." Hannah looked up, surprised, her eyes blinking in the light. She hadn't expected cheers or even claps, but in that moment, as the crowd stood and applauded, she felt something she had never felt before, seen. A song without words but full of meaning. The sound of clapping filled the entire room. It wasn't weak or slow, it was strong. Rising louder with each second, people stood from their seats one by one, until almost everyone in the auditorium was on their feet. Their hands moved as if they had no choice, as if their hearts needed to say something their mouths couldn't. But Hannah just sat there, still and quiet. Her fingers were resting gently on her lap, her head slightly lowered. She looked like she didn't know what to do. No smile, no bow, just surprise. The sound around her felt far away, like an ocean of noise crashing while she floated quietly in the middle. She looked out at the crowd, blinking against the stage lights. The same students who once whispered and laughed were now looking at her like she was someone else, someone important, someone who mattered. A few faces in the crowd looked stunned, like they had just seen something they couldn't explain. One teacher had her hands near her face, clearly wiping tears, even the loud kids. The ones who always joked were silent now. They weren't laughing anymore. They couldn't. Because what they had just heard didn't come from a place of humor or performance. It came from a place of truth. Hannah stood slowly, picked up her notebook, began walking off the stage. She didn't rush, didn't wave. She just walked like someone who had finally let something go. As she passed through the side curtains, a staff member reached out. That was beautiful. She whispered. Hannah paused, unsure of how to respond. She gave a small nod and moved on. Backstage, the hallway was quiet. Most of the performers were either still clapping or standing near the side of the stage, stunned. Hannah walked alone down the hallway and out the back door into the cool air. She found a small bench near the music room and sat down. Her heart was still racing. It's not from fear anymore, but from release. For years, she had carried that pain in silence, locked inside her chest and scribbled in her notebook, but today, she had let it out. She had spoken without saying a word. She looked up at the night sky, the stars blinking softly above her. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She felt understood. Suddenly, the door opened behind her. Footsteps approached slowly. It was Mr. Ellis, the janitor, holding a small cup of warm tea. He handed it to her without saying anything and sat down beside her. They sat together in silence for a while. Then he spoke, his voice low and kind. "You just told your whole story without saying a single sentence." Hannah looked at him, eyes still unsure. "Do you think they understood it?" she asked softly. He nodded. They didn't need to understand every part. They just needed to feel it. He looked up at the stars. "Most people spend their lives hiding what hurts, but you played it, and they listened." Hannah sipped the tea, the warmth spreading through her chest. She didn't feel like crying, not anymore. Instead, she felt light, like something had been lifted from her back inside the auditorium. People were still talking about the performance. Some students looked at each other, unsure how to feel. Others said things like, "I didn't know she had that in her," or "that was something else." The popular kids stayed quiet. It's not because they didn't have something to say, but because, for once, they didn't know how to joke about what they had seen. The music. Teacher finally walked up to Mr. Ellis backstage and asked, "Was that the girl you told me about?" He nodded proudly. "I told you she wasn't loud." But she had something inside her that needed to be heard. Later that night, someone posted a video of Hannah's performance online. It wasn't edited. No flashy text or effects, just a simple recording of a girl and a piano. Within a few hours, comments started appearing. "Who is this girl? I don't know her story, but I felt every second of that song. This made me cry. I don't even know why." The video started to spread slowly. Not because of trends or popularity, but because it touched something real in people. A feeling they didn't expect, but couldn't forget. Hannah didn't know about the video yet. She was still sitting outside, her notebook beside her. She opened it and looked at the page where the song had been written. She stared at it for a moment, then smiled slightly. She didn't give it a title. She never needed to. Because for the first time, people heard her without needing to ask her name. And tomorrow, everything would start to change. The standing ovation was only the beginning the next morning. Everything felt different. Not in the world outside, not in the sky or the streets, but inside the school walls, where silence usually followed Hannah. Like a shadow, something had shifted as she walked through the hallway. Students actually looked at her. Not in a mocking way this time, not with whispers or giggles, but with curiosity, with surprise, and something close to respect. A group of girls who used to walk past her without even noticing her now moved aside politely. One of them even smiled in awkward, unsure smile, but it was real. A boy near the lockers nodded at her as she passed. Another one said, "Hey, that was, really cool." She didn't reply, just nodded gently, her hand still clutching the same notebook when she entered her classroom. The room fell quiet for a moment. She felt every eye on her, and for a second, she thought about walking right back out. But then the teacher greeted her kindly. "Good to see you, Hannah," he said with warmth that hadn't been there before. He didn't say more, but his tone said everything. Even the kids who once laughed stayed silent now, not because they had suddenly become kind, but because something in that performance had touched them in a place they didn't understand. During lunch, Hannah sat in her usual corner in the cafeteria, but this time, a girl from another table walked over. "Do you mind if I sit here?" she asked, her tray shaking just slightly. Hannah looked up, surprised, and nodded slowly. They didn't talk much, just ate quietly, but for the first time ever, she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, something was happening online. The video of her performance had been uploaded the night before. At first, it had only a few views, mostly from students at school. But then, someone shared it on a local Facebook group. Then another person posted it on a music blog by morning. The video had already crossed 20,000 views. People from all over the world were commenting, "This girl doesn't even need lyrics. I felt her pain. I've never cried listening to piano before, but here I am. Who is she? Where can I hear more?" The comments kept coming, each one full of emotion. People shared the video with their friends, saying, "You need to hear this." Musicians, music teachers, and even therapists began commenting about how powerful the piece was. No one knew Hannah's story, but they all felt it in her notes. Back at school, the music teacher finally watched the full performance online. He had been too busy during the show itself to listen properly. But now, sitting alone in his office, he watched in silence. By the end, his eyes were wet, and he sat still for a long time. He picked up the phone and made a few calls. Then later that day, he found Hannah sitting in the music room, alone, as always. She looked up when he entered. He was unsure if she was in trouble, but he smiled gently and said, "You've got a gift, Hannah." She lowered her eyes. "I just played how I felt," she replied quietly. "And that's exactly why it mattered," he said. "How would you feel about recording it properly? Maybe sharing more?" Hannah didn't answer right away. She wasn't used to attention, or offers, or praise. She had always made music for herself, for her own healing, not the world. But now the world had heard her. The world had listened. Later that week, she was invited to perform again, this time at a city youth arts event. Her first answer was no, but her heart said maybe. She sat by her window that night, watching the stars, just like after the talent show. She thought about the silence she used to live in, and how that silence had become a song that now echoed far beyond her small room. Maybe, just maybe, there were others out there like her, others who needed to hear that it's okay to be quiet, it's okay to feel pain, and it's okay to speak through something other than words. So she said yes. Not for the applause, not for the attention, but because sharing her music meant sharing her truth. And truth, once freed, could help others too. At the next performance, there was no laughter, no whispers, only silence, and then music, real, pure, and full of meaning. And when she finished, the standing ovation was not the beginning anymore. It was the path forward.